Hello, everyone. A warm greetings and a welcome back to Intersections, where we take time every Thursday at 11 a.m. East Coast time to come together and reflect on where we are headed as individuals, as communities, and as all of humanity on this planet, with the aspiration of exploring our fullest potential, both in life and at work, in leadership. We, some time back, had on this show my dear colleague at the Mentora Institute, Raghu Krishnamoorthy. And we spoke between Raghu and I about some of the ideas and experiences that he was bringing about what was happening in the workplace when work and workers were actually coming home at the early stages of the COVID crisis. Now we're at a stage where we are realizing that this is not going away very soon. It's a state that we have to start to acclimate to and find a way to see it as a environment in which we have to learn not just to survive, but find a way to thrive. And in the meanwhile, Raghu has been doing some really interesting work and research on this topic. And I thought this would be a timely moment for us to all come back and have that conversation again with Raghu as to what some of his key learnings have been on this theme of work from home and the future of work, the worker, and the workplace. So a warm welcome to all of you. I know you're signing in and using chat to share with us where you're from. I encourage as many of you as you can to use chat as a way to get more actively engaged, share, connect, ask questions, and make it as lively a forum as anything that we can do in the audio video side of our work as well. Before I bring Raghu on, I just want to spend a minute sharing a couple of things with you about who it is that will be the expert in the room today. So here goes. Bear with me. Okay, so Raghu is a colleague of mine at Mentora. Before that, in his academic career, he has gotten an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad, the premier management institute in India. He is currently pursuing his doctoral studies at UPenn. In addition to his work at Mentora, he has had a storied career in GE, 36 years of experience as an HR professional, named as one of the top 50 Asian Americans in the world of business in 2009, was the CHRO of GE Healthcare, GE Aviation, the Chief Talent Officer and Learning Officer of GE for many years. And then, of course, now we have the privilege of having him be part of our team here at Mentora. Raghu has been giving talks on his ideas about where management and culture and human potential in organizations is going at a number of very storied institutions. And more recently, as he's been doing this work on the future of work, he has been actively tapped by a number of think tanks and expert bodies in media to share some of the key findings and insights that he's gotten from them. Most recently, having the Academy of Business Research nominate his paper as the best paper in business, very recently. So it is a great pleasure for me to have in our midst Raghu Krishnamoorthy. Raghu, thank you for joining us today. Warm welcome.
Thank you, Hitendra, for a very, very warm welcome and introduction. Really appreciate being here.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful. I want you to know, I want you to feel a little bit on the spot because we have some storied people in our audience today. I'm noticing my dear friend Mitch Medik, who's been one of the longest standing presidents of a major university in America, Florida International University, and before that a professor at Harvard Business School and a successful entrepreneur as well. Mitch, greetings. Thank you for joining us, and the same to all of you, who are part of this conversation today. Raghu, what got you interested with all that's going on to dedicate your energies in your doctoral research to this question of what is the on-the-ground reality and challenge and possibilities of work from home?
Yeah. No, in some ways, we are going through an unprecedented phenomenon. right? Imagine if you are Rip Van Winkle of the modern era. Last year, around this time, you had gone to sleep and woken up. You wouldn't recognize the world that we are living in today. Of course, we've had a battering from the pandemic, and that's something that we need to factor into the account. But our roads are empty, our offices are empty, our schools are empty. People are doubling down on work from home. So, from that point of view, very clearly, working from home had suddenly shifted. It used to be a benefit that could have been retracted anytime, and a few leaders did that. Marissa Mayer famously retracted this benefit in 2013, though it still continued to grow as a preference, especially among the younger generation in terms of at least working from home once or twice a week. But it actually was a benefit. However, the pandemic made a huge shift. It became a business continuity contingency arrangement. So it was a response to the fact that you had to change overnight to working from home. And then now people are starting to look at this as maybe a productivity initiative, and it could be something that could be there for a long time or perhaps changes forever. So you're now having a conversation whether this is a living future of work discussion as opposed to a coming future of work discussion. So given this transition, I was very intrigued by using this movement to study the phenomena, and that's what I embarked on. I can't hear you. We lost your.
Raghu, how did you do this study? What is your data set?
So it's a mixed method study, and the study itself was about what are the factors influencing employees and managers in working from home during the transition because of COVID-19. So that was the topic. We had a quantitative side to it, and we had about 580 responses from people across the world, across age groups, across industries, across types of organizations, startups to mature organizations. Once we had that data and analyzed it for its salient insights, we then had focus groups from among the participants to give us what kind of details can you go into, because it's something new, and we want to not just look at the data but also understand one level deeper in terms of human stories that people attach to that data. So we had focus groups where we asked people, explain to us why you said that managers experience more stress and anxiety during such times. And then what we did was we threw open the study to a group of senior HR managers and learning leaders, saying that, okay, with this data, how do you want to make decisions for your organization? So that was the journey we went through over a period of 3 months. And I must say that it was an extremely interesting 3 months, because even during this time, people started settling down. We did the survey in April, and at that time, people were still, negotiating their equation with working from home as an organizational initiated drive as opposed to benefit. And now people have settled down, and I think we are now in a different phase. In the first phase, what I found was organizations felt it was not as bad as they thought it would be, but employees thought it was not as good an arrangement as they thought it would be. But as we are now 5, in fact, in some cases, 6 months into the journey, and if organizations are now wanting to go back to an office space, people are saying no. So we are still in some kind of a gridlock, with many organizations still figuring out what is the new equation going forward. So we are still very much in the conversation. The study is not over. We have an early glimpse of what people's thinking are, but I do believe that this is going to be a longitudinal study, which is trying to see the evolution of people's framing of the issue over a period of time, and I hope to do that over the next many months.
Okay, very good. Let's do this. Let's do a couple of polls right here. Let's collect some data right here. What do you think?
Sure, it'll be great to do that.
So one that we put together, and I'm going to ask my colleague Anobik to put this up. What we're going to do is, in the chat window, we're going to send you a link. If you click on the link, it'll take you to the question that we're asking you. So the first question that we're asking you is simply, like, in one word, how are you feeling about working from home? I realize that some of you, may not have that kind of a situation, but for all of you who do, which there is a large number, how are you feeling from working from home in one word, right? So let's just answer that. What you got to do is click on that link that you are seeing in the chat window, all right? And if you, for some reason, don't have your chat open, that link is merely pollev.com/Hitendra Wadhwa, my name. So pollev.com/HITENDRAWADHWA. And if you found that a mouthful, blame my mom for that name. It's starting to emerge. Oh yeah, some of you are just using the chat window to share how you're feeling. Hopefully that's not just you telling me how you felt about my name, Raj and Marissa and John. But I hear you. I think you're expressing the challenge of working from home, isn't it? Okay, great. Thank you for that. So we have a poll coming together here. It's interesting. What do you think, Raghu, of some of the words that are starting to emerge?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, it's a great collage of people's perspectives, and I think it got reinforced in my study as well. I would say the key findings from the study were as follows. First is actually most people felt that they were pretty effective in working from home. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. However, if you look at the independent variables we looked at, communication, technology, behavior, and psychology. Communication was not a problem. Technology was not a problem. In fact, if you look at the work around future of work, it's all around technology. But technology is a hygiene factor. If you have it, it's great. If you don't have it, you have a problem. Where people, at least in the beginning of this journey, felt disoriented was the psychological side. And that had to do with managing schedules, isolation, managing the fact that you now have children and you have to divide up the work between yourself and your spouse. Those were things that you were not ready for. And that happened all of a sudden. So people were navigating through that and found some difficulty. The task itself was not an issue.
Yeah.
Now I think over a period of time, people are experiencing a little more comfort because they have worked out the kinks in their life. But we'll talk a little more about the whole work-life piece of the whole equation. I think there's still some work to be done. What it tells you is people have actually settled down, and I think that's a good place to be. This page, if you put up in front of an organization, the challenge for them to think through is how am I going to get people back to office?
Yeah, I mean, look at some of these things here. I mean, there are some positives. I see people, like some people saying enjoying, some people saying flexibility.
Yes.
Some people saying, it's the same. Some people saying energized, equilibrated.
Right.
Then we're also seeing alone, lonely, longer, distracted, stir crazy, mixed, tiring, lower. So we do have some unresolved challenges here. Raghu, you mentioned that as part of it, you did these focus groups and you discovered something very interesting and insightful personal stories. Can you give an example of one or two of those stories that emerged that kind of like surprised you?
Yeah, let me share with you. Suppose you are a mom with a couple of small kids, and you're a manager with a globally distributed team. This lady shared with me that she gets off the morning at 5:30, rolls off the bed, and starts getting on calls with Asia in the morning, Europe in the afternoon or 10 o'clock, and then evening she gets on with the American workforce she has. While she's doing that, she also has to take care of kids who are now at home. So there is snack time, there is lunch time, there is mom time required for those kids because they have no other outlet. And managing the two and figuring out how to work that equation was really tough on her because she had to make some trade-offs between work and her children. And I think a supportive organization culture, a supportive boss helps her. But the fact that she was finding it difficult to juggle with that, that was one. The second thing was a young man who was working in Bangalore. He was staying in a paying guest accommodation, which for some of you, if you don't know what it is, you hire a room in somebody's house and stay there, and you're originally from a village. And this person was saying that I don't have a desk, I don't have a chair, I'm sitting on my bed working for 12 hours. The restaurants are closed outside. I have to depend on my landlord to get me a sandwich. And this is Ramadan, so I'm Muslim, so I'm fasting as well. And I can only connect with my parents at 10:30 in the night. So he says, I am really struggling I'm not in a locked in kind of a situation. I feel I'm actually a captive. Yeah. And therefore, I don't know how to work myself way out of this captivity I'm facing. And the third story I would say is, another person said, I actually feel the need to go out and hug somebody. Forget social distancing, forget physical distancing. I need that human connection. And we now know that the absence of human connection is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. There is medical evidence about isolation creating the same dynamic as a health hazard, which is smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's something really tangible for us to really think about as people navigate their way through a very difficult period when they're all alone. So you not just have to look at the comments there, but there are different personas involved that we need to factor into account here.
Raghu, one of my responsibilities in this conversation is to take it from like the outer, challenge more to the inner quest, and so if I were to wear that hat and you give me that permission for a minute, I'm reminded of a story I was just hearing last week. It was this annual spiritual convocation of my spiritual teacher Yogananda that you know, and his organization Self-Realization Fellowship. One of the stories that was shared there about the relationship he had with some of his near disciples, very, very close disciples, back in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s when he first came and set up this, yoga-based, teaching and this organization, was that sometimes he would deliberately actually physically, distance himself from some of those, close disciples who could otherwise have unfettered access to him. And he was saying, get attuned from within. Go and deepen your meditations, because of course, in that case, it's a spiritual path, and seek to have that connection, with me and with the higher power, from within. Of course, that is a fairly, radical kind of, quest relative to the work, place that we're talking about, where people were doing their own truth seeking and self-realization and going on that journey. But the one sort of parallel I want to draw with that is that there is research to say that shows that loneliness, is a disease, which you've just shared. There's also research to show that loneliness is more of an inner condition rather than an outer condition. In that you could be, for example, a Bollywood or Hollywood celebrity, and you have tons of friends and fans, but you're actually feeling really lonely from within. And then there are others who may actually really thrive in solitude because somehow they've created a really deep connection from within to something that gives them a lot of soul enrichment. And while this is not the answer that we need right now in the world of business and in thinking about work-life balance and all of that, and bringing back some physicality, some engagement, which you've highlighted through that comment from that individual, which is a beautiful comment. I relate to it so much. This thing about missing hugging, for example, I relate to it so much. At the same time, I think maybe one of the things this pandemic has done is just invited all of us, to, when we are not getting things from the outer world, to look within and see how rich are we from within, and what do we need to do to further enrich ourselves from within? What are the treasures we need to create from within so that over time we get more and more self-sustained, right? At least in some of the basic nurturing that we need, even while we seek to find a way to work ourselves out of this pandemic. So anyway, just a thought.
And I think it's an important thought. I think one of the things it tells us is we had for such a long time become dependent on external stimuli, right? And even if you're staying at home, most of the stimuli you're getting is from the news, and news is as much of a health hazard these days as the pandemic. because it riles you up. I think the profound comment that you make is very important, because I do believe as people start thinking about mental health and well-being, you're starting to see the fact that people are gravitating more towards the internal part of the equation: meditation, gratitude, and so on and so forth. I heard a comment from somebody the other day, a CEO saying that I've been using Headspace for the last couple of years. Just don't tell anybody that. It tells you that maybe like fitness was, say, 15, 20 years ago, mental well-being is going to become part of mainstream going forward. And I hope it does.
Yeah. Very, very powerful, Raghu. Let's do this. Let's do another poll, right? Let's see, like, where are people, placed with regard to, like, when you have the chance, if you wanted to like work from the office or work from home, what would you prefer doing, given the experience you've had over the last few months? So Anobik, if we can put up that next poll, that would be great. We are again giving you the same link. It's the same link. You go to the link, and in this case, the question has changed. And the question now is a multiple choice question. We're just trying to see where do you guys land on this one. Anobik, let's not show it until a fair number of people have answered, and then let's just kind of like show it at that time, right? And as you're going there to show that, Raghu, I'm just going to orient you towards the next piece of the conversation that we can have, which is what are you learning about work-life balance at a time like this, both from the vantage point of the individual and the organization, on how it's playing out. So let's talk about that.
The big question that we need to think through is, are we working from home or are we living at work? That's the question. And from that point of view, I'm actually even wondering, one of the participants pointed out, maybe it's not work-life balance. Maybe we should think about this as a work-life conflict, because we are not in balance. Another person said, no, we may need to think about it differently yet again, because when we were talking about work-life balance at work, it was about life intruding into work. I used to go to office, and I had to go and attend my daughter's basketball game or a music concert, and life used to intrude into work. Now you're at home, at work, and work is intruding into life. You've got children to take care of, you've got healthcare issues, you've got elderly parents to take care of, and therefore that conflict is inevitable. Some people know how to manage it, but it raises the question, how are people managing it? And the ostensible way people seem to be managing it, I need to take care of myself. Nutrition, exercise, sleep, gratitude, those are important. We are forgetting a very important part in this equation, and that's work. If you're taking care of your physical self and mental self, what you're saying is, I'm actually trying to attend to the balance part of my life in my spare time. But you're still spending bulk of your time in work. If the work itself is not enriching, you're still going to have that imbalance. So I'm actually thinking about a new phrase. It's not work-life balance. Should we think about work-life enrichment, where work itself is a source of nourishment and enrichment, and we are discounting that. And I believe, for me, that points to a few things. One is, organizations look at work-life balance as a benefit issue. Let's outsource it to employee assistance program. Let's talk about childcare. Let's talk about time off or sick leave. That is one part of the equation. But if organizations say, okay, I am really not just going to tap my people for their skills, but for their potential and dreams, I'm going to create an organizational culture that allows people to grow, that allows the managers to be supportive of their employees and the co-workers to be supportive. Those are the three dimensions. In my research, I found organization culture, manager, and the co-worker. These three are key drivers of work enrichment. So that's when work moves from just a job to something that's more profound, say a calling. And when work is a calling, you're able to take the positive energy from work and transfer it to life. If work is not a calling, then it becomes a drain. So I believe work needs to be energizing. And for that, we need to think about purpose in the workplace, love in the workplace, growth in the workplace, and self realization in the workplace. I do believe the energies that we talk about at Mentora become a real muscle in making sure that the work part is actually enriching as well. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to find equilibrium, despite of you meditating for 8 hours. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I think I'm hearing from you the importance of changing the motivational levers of work, the engagement levers from purely extrinsic and outer more to intrinsic, something that makes work just naturally and intrinsically and authentically, inspiring for each individual, so that they can, in their own personal space and way, create a sense of fulfillment from it, whether or not they're actually, in a physical space with other people at work. Self-realization, growth, purpose, love being all parameters that will help them get there. Let's look at the results of the poll that we just did. So I'm going to ask my colleague Anobik to kind of just share what it is that we learned. But look at that. Yeah. Always from office, 8%.
Look at that. It tells you now if a leader is looking at this and takes a look at it, it's going to change the dynamic and perspective of how they need to think about office. First of all, the good news, it's not binary. It's not either or. It's both. Secondly, Siemens has done a phenomenal job, and the CEO has said, listen, in future, you decide where you want to work. You decide where you're going to be most productive. And productivity doesn't mean presence for me. And that shift is a very progressive shift organizations are making. And a lot of organizations are saying that, okay, therefore, this is no more a contingency arrangement. This is a future of work reset. And in this reset, we're going to think about the worker, and the workplace very differently. And progressive organizations will say, okay, I'm going to empower employees to determine where they want to work, when they want to work, and create the environment to do so. No, we lost you.
One of the things that strikes me about what you're just saying about the Siemens example is that it speaks to a culture of higher level of trust between the manager and their team. Because you can no longer keep like a watchful eye over the employee as to physically what are they doing. You could never really keep a watchful eye over how they're feeling from within and what they're thinking from within. That was our own private space. But now even physically, what each of us is doing, when we are waking up and when we are showing up for work, and what level of energy we're bringing, etc. Any or all of this is now less visible, until we start putting webcams into people's offices or anything, if they're working from home, right? And so it suggests to me that it's almost like the consciousness of the workplace has to evolve to a higher place, where there is such a sense of intrinsic motivation, a strong bond, a deep commitment to the purpose, that you can just take it on faith, that people are doing the hardest work they can. The other part, which I think makes trust so central in this case, is in the past, there was just this, this very spoken or unspoken understanding that, look, you keep your home affairs at home, and then you show up at work, and then you're meant to work. And every now and then there's a rare exception. Maybe you lose a loved one, or somebody is seriously sick. And of course, in those cases, we will give you those concessions, but otherwise you're at work. Now, we realize that every now and then, a small child could be having, a tantrum, or something, or could be having a little struggle with their own learn from home kind of routine or something. And how do you know, what's genuine and what's not genuine, and what's like addressable and not addressable, etc. You just have to take it on faith that each person on your team is doing the best they can, right, to make that kind of balance happen.
I think it's a big realization. Just like when we now know, at least in the US, there's so much debate about children going back to school. When the child comes to school, you're not just talking about the brain coming to the school. You're talking about the child coming in with the baggage of issues around nutrition, issues around health, issues around domestic violence, and so on. You're bringing the whole child to the school, not just the brain. In the same way, organizations need to realize that they're bringing the whole person, not just the skill, not just the hands. If they realize that, then as Mihai sits in my talks about in flow, you are a soul to be uplifted, not just a skill to be optimized. Now, I know that's a little far-fetched for organizations to think about, but just take a look. If you ask the question, my study reveals a couple of things. When you ask the employees what training do they think they need to have, they talk about, we like to have training on homework standards, work-life balance, time management. But when you ask the question, what training would they like their leaders to have? Trust, empathy, emotional intelligence come through as the top three, which tells you what they need from the organization, what they need from their leaders is a very supportive, nurturing, compassionate overture. There's some drilling going on here, part of our work from home reality.
Yeah. Sure. No worries. No, thank you. I mean, it's a very powerful, I think, lesson for those of us who are leaders, who are managers, as to what our people are looking for from us. And while it's, it's hard to figure out like how to really address that need. And Raghu, I'd like you to take us there next. Like, what are you learning about how are managers being able to successfully execute a greater sense of connection, empathy, belonging, for the employees at a time like that? Let's take a moment's digression. And I'm turning to this comment from Marissa, where she's saying, look, I teach higher ed, and teaching online has taken all the fun out of teaching and just left the work. Marissa, as someone who also teaches higher ed, I relate to your comment a lot. It's something that is really a real challenge that many of us here at Columbia Business School, for example, are facing as well. I want to though also offer a ray of hope right in this. So one of the first attempts I had at doing this in the April-May timeframe didn't go that well. I was really out of my elements and trying to figure out how to bring forth the same connection and bond and esprit de corps and all of that, in that classroom that had transitioned from being physical to being online. Then I learned some important lessons. And one of those lessons was, Hitendra, don't be on autopilot. Actually really rethink what it is that you and the class need to experience and how you're going to experience it, and put some real effort and thought into it. Just because you've taught this class for 10 years doesn't mean that you can put it on autopilot right now. And actually, it was my wife, Renu, who actually really kind of took me for a long walk, after I was feeling depressed about what happened in April and May, and invited me to go into that space of reinvention and re-examination. And that has worked out really well, at least in the next tranche of teaching that I've had to do, where, in the summer, I taught a 90-person class over a block week. And by putting in some new design elements, etc., became, of course, everybody yearns for that physical classroom. We all yearn for it. But we came to a very, very good place. And at the end of it, I was just feeling so grateful for that challenge, that transformation, that effort, and the collaboration of the class. Part of it is setting expectations with these people up front, which I think, Raghu, could be a best practice even in the workplace, right? Just setting expectations that, look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be different. We're all going to have to step out of comfort zone. We're going to have to establish new protocols for how we communicate, new disciplines for how we connect and all of that. And let's do it. And if we do it, who knows what breakthroughs and insights we'll achieve. So Raghu, back to you. What have you learned about how great managers and great cultures are adapting to the demands of today's employees?
I'll share with you a story. I heard this from one of the focus group participants, and this person was on the autistic spectrum. He shared with me the fact that he really struggled in terms of picking up cues when we went to working from home, when their organization went to working from home. For nearly 1 or 2 weeks, he was interrupting people when he should not be interrupting. He was silent when he needed to speak because he was missing all the cues. Now, that's when I think there is one interesting phrase he used that I think is very powerful. He said, my manager listened with her eyes. And she called me up and said, what's wrong? Help me understand. You don't seem to be where you should be. And is there something I can do to help you? Now, he was so grateful for that conversation. He said, listen, I'm on the spectrum, though it's not very obvious. I'm really struggling to the normal cues that I would get under such circumstances. He said, okay, let me, the lady then said, okay, I'll figure out a protocol. So over the next couple of days, next couple of meetings, she figured out a way saying that, okay, every time we're going to have a meeting, and if you want to interrupt somebody, you need to hold a pink slip. Or if you want to, if you have completed a thought, you should say Roger, just like you do in a walkie-talkie. Now, people found it strange in the beginning. She explained to them that one of the colleagues is finding it difficult to follow everybody, and therefore she's instituting these rules to make sure that that person is not left behind. Can you imagine the motivation this individual now feels about the fact that the group and the manager was particularly sensitive to the needs that he had? And I think that is one story I can talk about the fact, and it extrapolates to the fact that the managers have a responsibility of listening with their eyes and providing emotional first aid when it's required. It's not what we normally do as managers is emotions is not something we tackle. We delegate it to either a third party or to an HR person. However, in a trusting relationship you have with your manager, only when you feel your manager's arms around you saying that I'm here for you, do you know and you feel the sense of balance. Because there are one of the things we found in our research is there are 5 relationships that have actually all been appended right now: person family, person boss, person subordinate, person client. In one particular organization, they found that the salespeople actually had higher blood pressure over the last 3-4 months because they could not interact with the clients the way they used to. And finally, person occupation. How is your career going to be affected? What does it mean in terms of salary? So all 5 of them have gone through a disruption. The one that makes that fills the gap the most is person manager. And second is person family. Because family you feel is within your control. With the manager, it's not so. So if your manager is sensitive, so how organizations train their managers to listen, to create trust, to be empathetic, to have the right amount of emotional intelligence in nurturing their teams in times like this virtually, coach virtually. Those are some key competencies that are starting to emerge that you wouldn't have found in a normal face-to-face environment.
Yeah. Raghu, did you hear anything about any solutions out there, any technologies that are being used in very innovative ways? Or is this something that really we cannot depend on or lean on or wait for, like technological breakthroughs? We just kind of have to figure it out, because for the most part, fundamentally, it's about, these kinds of human-to-human connections, and you can form them even just with a telephone.
Actually, honestly, there is some really good thinking going around in technology, right? There is a mural. See, what people are finding is technologies to get the task done, not an issue. Technologies to connect, collaborate is still more of an issue. So task virtuality, not an issue. Team virtuality is still an issue. So how do you collaborate virtually? How do you connect virtually is still evolving. So there are some new technologies that are starting to appear. Liberating structures is one that I heard, which really captures a way you can do a collaborative meeting very well. Mural is another one. I think there are 3 or 4 of these clear tools that are emerging. But more than that, what I'm sensing is managers that actually spend time with their teams and say, how do we do this? What protocols do we need to establish? Both from check-in, how do I check in with you? Because initially, some people said many of the check-in actually appeared as checkups. People are checking up on me as opposed to checking in on me, which is not a trust equation, right? But if you then, just like this lady did with this autistic boy, how do I relate with you? How do I create that environment? That's a good way of not waiting for the technological solutions, but allowing for the group itself to come out with appropriate vehicles through which they would collaborate together, nurture together, spend time together. The Friday evening Zoom parties or happy hours, they're all important, vehicles to continue to create an environment that is positive and wholesome when everything else is negative and tough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Our dear friend Pat McLagan, who is a very seasoned leadership and culture expert, has done some remarkable work. Hello, Pat. Welcome to the show. And, I fondly remember so much of the incredible journey that you have taken in your career. Among other things, Pat actually went over to South Africa and worked for the, rebuilding of that, like, post-apartheid phase, of that nation with the leaders around Nelson Mandela, I know you've got incredible insight on management. Do share more thoughts, as we are evolving this conversation as well, Pat. But here she is. She's saying, like, look, we need to switch away from time at work to looking at what are people providing, delivering, what actual value is being created. Maybe this is more complex because many of these, like you're saying, require collaboration, Raghu. They're team products, that we need to build. There are a couple of technologies that I've been, watching with interest even before coronavirus came. One of them, is this like little kind of mobile robot-like thing, which has like a, like an iPad, like, kind of like face to it, and and you can remotely control it. And so, like, if you're, sitting in your home, I'm sitting in my home, and I have one of those, and you have one of those, and I want to reach out and connect with you, I could just kind of like control this robot next to you so that it's facing you, you're facing it, you're seeing my face on it, and I'm having a conversation with you. Or let's say you're in an office and I'm not in an office, or there are two people in that room with you. I can turn that face towards the other person, look at, so I'm controlling my physical experience of a remote space. So that was one. I remember walking on the University Avenue in Palo Alto and seeing a store that was basically selling that. I don't know how proliferated that's become. The second I thought, which was quite kind of interesting, was when there were remote workplaces, like two different offices, one in Miami, one in New York, and they needed to be more connected. So what they'd done is created big, large screens, 24/7, like live, like webcams, and just place them in the typical places where people bump into each other, like the corridors, like the coffee machines, like literally even outside the restrooms, as people are just walking in or coming out. And so, as you kind of just go to the coffee machine on this big screen, you see that one of your colleagues in the other office has also gone to the coffee machine. And so you can have a conversation with them spontaneously, right there, like you might otherwise in a physical office. As we think about the future of work, and we think about situations like we just saw here, where so many of us are saying, like, we want to continue to work from home, or at least part of the time to work from home. I wonder if technology might intrude a little bit into that, but in a way that makes some business sense, which is like, hey, please create an office for yourself at home, and let's set some expectations as to a minimum core of time where all of us will be working at the same time, right? Yes, you have some commitments to your child, and I have to my ailing parent or something. But could we at least agree that as a team, at least the 7 or 8 of us, that between whatever it is, 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., we'll all be there at work in our offices, and we'll have the live cam on so that each of us can just kind of like just see with the other person, and just every now and then talk to them as needed. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, those boundary settings are very important. I think what becomes very clear is as we go back, you got to keep in mind our entire work design is based on physical work. That's been so embedded into our consciousness over the last couple of 100 years, right? However, now we have to consciously transfer that into a virtual work design and virtual work experience. It calls for very different ways of figuring out how you connect with each other, right? To your point, some of it is technology driven, but some of it could be very simple ways of doing it. For instance, every time people get onto a call, like what we did, how are you feeling? Or one focus group manager said that she starts all her calls by saying that, can each of us share one moment of gratitude we felt over the last 24 hours? So these are some very simple, non-technical things that you can work with. Technology does help, but we need to not just think about technology, bringing in technology, but design the workflow to actually be comfortable by using the technology. I'll give you one example, right? If many of us go back to office space and some of us work from virtual space, we all know it's highly irritating when a bunch of leaders are sitting in a physical space and a few of us are in the virtual space, because they are having their own laughter, they're making side remarks. You are not a party to that one. You actually feel as though it's not remote working, it's remote shirking. And some of the people on the physical side may actually think about you as remote shirking. However, if you say, all right, in the future, everybody, even though we all may be together, is going to be on the screen. That discounts the fact that you're not going to avoid people who are working virtually. So we have to consciously switch over to think about the virtual space as the primary space, not the physical space. And that calls for a rethinking of the entire work model. Some organizations are starting to do that. Microsoft, for instance, has a role called workplace transformations. You have Allianz, which has got a role called new work model, actually led by the board. So how progressive organizations are and how CEOs, the C-suite, and even the board is taking an interest in the shift is going to be very critical for going forward. So you've got designing virtual workspaces, designing virtual employee experience, and creating virtual intelligence competencies as three important parameters of the future of work.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Here's Michelle saying, having worked with Raghu, he does this naturally as a leader. I love that he's truly thinking through how does he take what he knows intuitively to create a methodology so others can learn. That's beautiful, Michelle. If any of us here are keen to bring some of these ideas into your workplace, then get in touch with us. Get in touch with our colleague Jake DeBerry. His email is just jake@mentora.institute. Jake, Jake@mentora.institute. And we would love to have a conversation with your organization about some of these findings that Raghu is yielding from his research and how we are melding it with our training on culture and leadership in order to bring out the best for our organizations and teams in today's times. I was also struck by this comment from Ross. He's saying leading in a virtual environment requires the creation of intentional interactions in order to build these connections. In a face-to-face environment, much of this happens spontaneously because you are together. I would say, Ross, that maybe if I were to, further tweak the thought that you've offered here, it is that we have become habituated to and masterful of the physical environment. And so we as human beings have evolved certain just like instinctual codes for how to build connection in those environments. Now we are in a new environment, this virtual environment. And we have to your point, Ross, be intentional because we have to build new instincts. We don't have these instincts. We have to experiment. We have to be open to a certain number of failures and learn and introspect and reflect what worked and what didn't work. And therefore, what am I learning about how to actually rebuild those connections, even in a virtual space, right? And this reminds me of a theme that is very close to the heart of one of our dear friends and business colleagues, Feroz at SAP, who's leading an engineering academy there. And one of the core qualities that he's seeking to help develop in those lead engineers at SAP is curiosity. This idea of just like always being on fire to not feel like or that you've arrived and that you get it, but that you don't know and you don't yet have full thorough awareness of what the possibilities are. And so you're going to question, you're going to experiment, you're going to discover, you're going to listen, and who knows where that journey takes you. And I don't know, it seems to me, Raghu, that ethic of like the wisdom energy in our work, of opening yourself up to new possibilities, unshackling yourself from the habits of the past, as Ross is saying, to be intentional about it. Sounds like a critical need for the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think from my point of view, if we did not take this moment as a transformational opportunity, we would be missing the point. And I do believe that I love the phrase intentional interactions. It's never become more important. What we found in our research is an employee is the sum total of his contributions. Only part of those contributions are related to tasks. Much of the contributions are related to good organizational citizenship. It's no different in society, right? We are now realizing that as citizens of society, we have more than our family to take care of. And therefore, those connections as organizational citizens have to be really strong for us to also find meaning and wisdom. So, to your point, a human being experiences growth only when the context is also powerful and compelling. And unless you give, you are in a position to share and expand. You're not going to get much from the outer world or from the context. So a lot you have to do it. Everybody has to do it, and that's when organizations, institutions find purpose, meaning, and relevance in society of today.
Yeah, Raghu, let's do this. Let's do another poll. We have this third poll. Anobi, can you put it up on the screen so we can see the poll? And we're going to give you the same link. You just go to the same place and do this one as well. And this time we are curious to understand what kind of challenges are you facing in work from home, right? And so what we've done is we posted a number of challenges there, and you could pick from multiple of these, right? It doesn't have to be only one of them. But we'd be curious to see which of these are things that are very real for all of us here in this room, in this virtual room. So, as you answer those questions, Raghu, is there any, like story or comment that also stood out, from your interviews that we haven't shared yet that would be worth sharing?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of surprises in my study. One was managers were facing more stress than employees, partly because of the fact that they were sandwiched between showing compassion to the employees and empathy to the employees, and still meeting their KPIs. So I think organizations will be well served to rethink some of their processes, goal setting, performance management, KPI. I think they need to be rethought and simplified in this environment. The second thing we found was that younger workers wanted to come back to office more than older workers. Likewise, workers in startups wanted to come back to office space more than workers in mature organizations. And the point behind that, when we explored, was younger workers haven't yet got the relationships and therefore have a stronger affinity distance. They are not operationally distant, they are not technologically distant. But the fact that they don't have the relationship means that there is sizable affinity distance that they want to bridge by coming back to work. The second thing is on startups. We found the startups, unfortunately, their processes are not yet robust. So the shared understanding of the context, the codes that we all learn over a period of time are not there. So for them, it actually creates a lot of confusion if they are not putting their mind in terms of evolving their processes. So people in startups also find it difficult in terms of working from home. I'm sure it'll evolve over a period of time, but those were some unique elements of my research that I found that I thought I should share with you.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So you're seeing the results here. How are you feeling about what you're seeing, about how people are responding to today's?
Look at that. Developing strong bonds with my colleagues, meeting the demands of my work and family. It shows you how important your connection with your colleagues are. At the end of the day, what comes through for me is working from home does help on self-interest. But working from the office or in a shared space, not necessarily from the office, helps in common interest. Yeah. So some people want both, to take care of their self-interest, but also want to address the common interest. And common interest is what's our meaningful purpose? How can we grow together? And the energies that we can derive from one another through compassion and love and empathy. Those are very powerful human motivators. So I think this discussion of future of work is less about technology and more about humanity.
Yeah, and about how we evolve, humanity, how we evolve our mindsets, our intentions, our interactions in a world that, at least for now, has become increasingly virtual and digital, right?
Yeah.
That if in the old world they would call it the man-machine interface. How do we? So this is more like the man-machine man, or like woman machine woman, right? Like that interface, like where there's a human being on both sides of it. One practice that I found quite inspiring from a leader that we work with. Raghu, you've been part of that engagement as well over the last year. So this is the president of this organization, and one thing that I've felt so inspired in their way of, like, their Zoom protocol is that this person is not always around in several of these meetings that are happening among the top leaders as they're kind of like working through transformation and reorganization, what have you. But when they are there, they always start the meeting by looking at each of the individuals present. So there might be between 10 and 15, sometimes even 20, and they will, in with such joy in their heart and such affection, they will look at the Zoom little kind of thumbprint video, right, of that individual and the next individual and the next individual. And as they have that warmth and that smile on their face, and as they're looking at those thumbprints, they're saying that I am looking at each of you. I'm looking at you now, and I'm looking at you. And it's their way of just saying, like, I'm connected. I'm connected to each of you. And it's giving me a great joy to do that right now, with the blessing of being able to actually even see you right on the other side. And so they just don't get into the meeting. They literally take like a couple of minutes just to build that human spirit there, which I thought was beautiful.
Yeah, I think there is one lesson, important lesson on this. Attention gives energy, not just time. So that's why when somebody calls you and says, "How are you doing?" Can I and showers that attention, you are able to carry that into other aspects of your life. So energy becomes very positive, and I think what your example shows is demonstrating that attention charges people, energizes people, and it's an important leadership tool to have.
Yeah, it was beautiful. As your former work colleague has been sharing, Michelle, right? Like I feel, Raghu, this is an area that you shine. It is incredible the way you show that attention, to every interaction, and it's something that I feel always very blessed, to have here at Mentora, not just with me, but with our colleagues. Another thought on that front I had about, just this, the biggest blip we saw on that screen was about the human connection side of it. Is if you think about the way connection is built, in the workplace, part of it is through the collaboration on the projects itself, and the stimulation and reward that we are getting from doing good work together, and that's obviously very important. But then also there are these more informal, like fun little, like bids for connection that one person makes about, like, did you watch the game last night, or like, I mean, what an amazing day it is here today in New York, or what have you. And how the other person then responds to that bit. And then from there, it opens up a little bit more and a little bit more. And before you know it, they spend about 5 minutes just nurturing the human spirit and creating that bond with nothing that has to do with work at all. And we may run the risk of losing that, in these more formal kind of, Zoom, or Microsoft Team kind of like meeting appointments that we have with each other. So one thing I found very valuable is to check in with yourself about, who are some people on your team that you haven't had that kind of a human touch with recently, and then see if you can find a few minutes, just to call them and check in as to whether they have availability or time, or if not, when in the day they might have time. And then just say, like, I didn't really have an agenda. I just wanted to just like say hi, how are you doing? Throw out a topic that just could be like an indication to that person that you really are not like here to like talk about like where are your deliverables. You're just here to have a little bit of just joyful fun exchange with them, right? And it's so rewarding when we can do that on some kind of periodic basis, maybe with intentionality, because it's just not happening spontaneously. I don't know what you think of that, Raghu.
It is so true. I can tell you personally that a recent introduction I'm so grateful for. A young lady reached out to me and my wife. She's a colleague of mine, also going through the doctoral program, saying that, hey, I know that you're over 60. I know that we're all under lock-in. I know you may find it difficult to go outside and buy groceries. Me and my boyfriend are here. Anytime you need anything, please ask us. We will be very happy to help you, fetch your groceries, fetch your medicines, whatever be the case. And that one small email has stood with me over the last 4 months as a symbol of this person, her reaching out to me and wanting to help. We have not had the opportunity of taking her help, but just that human overture actually, has cooled my heart, so to speak. And I believe that if you all can do that once a day or once a week, even, I think the world is going to be much better, not let alone your workplace. And I do believe that when managers show that kind of respect to the human person on the other side, and you can even see that in the presidential elections, that the human part of it is, at least in the Democratic Convention, people are trying to show the human side of Biden. I'm not a political person. I'm just commenting on what I see there, but it is a very important time for us to put that in full display.
Yeah, Raghu, we're coming close to the end, of our time here together. So I think what has emerged for me as the most important, a part of the story that we've unfolded here is that we need to be conscious. We need to have this intentionality so that we are not just blindly adhering to certain traditions and norms, of our culture, our workplace, or how we have sort of like done things until now. But we, each of us, take responsibility as being co-creators of a new world where who knows who is going to have what kind of breakthrough in terms of a ritual, a behavior, a way of engaging that ends up becoming then proliferated across the system, in our community, in our organization, in our family, and amongst our circle of friends, because we have to discover the future. We cannot just sort of like assume that it'll just like come here on its own or in some top-down way, right? So as each of us is going through that discovery and learning and experimentation, any final thoughts or words from you, Raghu, to advise and guide each of us as to one or two actions that we can take on in the next few days to just accelerate and deepen that discovery?
In times like this are great conversion periods. This is when we know what our gaps are. And for me, I would say three things: empathetic listening, giving emotional first aid, and forging connections. On the personal side, finding purpose at work, giving love and compassion at work, and finding growth at work on the work side. In some ways, what we are talking about is, can we use this as an opportunity to grow as human beings, not just as workers?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Raghu. It's been a real joy yet again to have you with us here, and I look forward to obviously staying myself in touch with what you're doing, but also having us have another opportunity in the imminent future to bring you back when you have further findings and insights, from this work that you've done as well. So thank you so much for joining us for this. Very, very grateful. And I'm going to just stay a minute more to tell you all about what we're going to have on our show next week. So stay tuned, stay with me for just a minute more. But let's use this moment to thank Raghu and appreciate, all the inspiration, not just insight, that you brought to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. So folks, I think in terms of the key learnings and summary from this, we have it, right? It's so much about the human side of the equation, the intrinsic motivation that we all need to cultivate, both in ourselves and others. That old rules of the game are starting to get broken, where we have to now create more of a trust-based environment and a culture, and more consciously experiment with certain behaviors that will rebuild the human equation that we may otherwise feel a little bit lost on, with the way that the pandemic has kind of pulled us away from the physical workplace. And perhaps then, when we come out of the pandemic and reacquire those degrees of freedom again, we will be in an even better position to create a better world, a better society. All right. Next week, we have an incredible force, with us. Someone who started his career by photographing Eleanor Roosevelt when she came to do a commencement address at his school, a very storied name in American leadership. And from there went on to photograph John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Robert Kennedy, Nelson Mandela, among many of these kind of stellar world leaders, and also some of the greatest stars, in Hollywood and in the performing arts. Was himself a performing artist, on the Metropolitan Opera stage. Was a close friend of Luciano Pavarotti. Has taken some incredible photographs of Pavarotti. Also later ended up, getting to really connect with the Beatles. Became very close to the Beatles, and took some of the most intimate, portraits of each of the Beatles, and then all together as well. An incredible man, Henry Grossman, will be with us next Thursday. I'm, delighted and honored to call him also my friend. And you're going to hear some incredible stories of human connection, of breaking, out of the bounds of the paparazzi to actually gain really intimate, access to these incredible personalities. His inside glimpse about these people and what they are like, when you're with them face to face, and his own very powerful and beautiful human journey. So join me next Thursday for an incredibly enriching and beautiful conversation with one of the preeminent, just documenters and photographers of the last several decades, Henry Grossman. All right. I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, have a wonderful next 7 days. Bye-bye.